Well, hi there, everybody. Gary Neville podcast, battling with Harry Kane tributes here at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but I think it's appropriate. You know, you've worked with him, you know him. We've got to know him in the media as well, as a proper person, as well as a very proper goal scorer. Your thoughts on what we've seen here today?
Yeah, I think people would probably rather listen to Harry Kane than me, but you know, he's got a beaming smile. We're just watching him here now. He's still addressing the crowd that have stayed behind to, I suppose, honour this unbelievable achievement. All these goals at Spurs, 267 goals, sorry.
And 200 in the Premier League.
Yeah, 200 in the Premier League. To go into a world where only Alan Shearer and Wayne Rooney are, which obviously two incredible players. And I was lucky enough to play with Alan Shearer. I was lucky enough to play with Wayne Rooney, and I was obviously lucky enough to be part of the coaching staff with England, with Harry Kane, and they all have similar traits in that their professionalism, their hard work, their consistency over a long period of time, and their ability to do the hardest thing in football, which is put the ball in the back of the net, is absolutely wonderful. Shearer and Kane, very alike in terms of their unwavering confidence, mentality, steel. I think that word steel comes to mind when I think of Shearer and Kane. You know, you think of what Harry went through 6 weeks ago with that, obviously that World Cup in Qatar, when obviously he puts the ball over the bar. It's probably the worst moment for Harry Kane, but actually he was the best player for that to happen to in terms of being able to recover from it because of his strong mentality. And you see him here today scoring a big goal for his club against City. A wonderful day for him.
It was very appropriate, wasn't it, that it should beat a team like the champions, the defending champions.
Yeah. And
he had a long wait from, 15th minute till well into injury time. They ended with 10 men as well. Not exactly hanging on, but it was a real proper day to do it.
It was, and like I say, it was a big goal. And it's good that obviously he scored the goal today, but obviously in a big game as well, which means something. It's the winning goal, so I think it couldn't have been more perfect for him. And we've now getting a tribute, I think, from the Greaves family that we're seeing going around the ground, and to surpass such a legend in English football, someone who was, I never saw Jimmy Greaves play football, you will have done, but I saw him on television. And you talk about personalities, he sort of informed my childhood from a point of view of television. And think about those shows that he did with Ian St John on a Saturday lunchtime. They were absolutely wonderful. And you hear of everybody speaking about Jimmy Greaves, about how wonderful a player he was in terms of a striker and a finisher and a goal scorer.
You're talking about 200 goals. Jimmy scored 357 in the top division, the old First Division, which is way ahead of the figures that we're talking about now. Incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible.
Absolutely unbelievable. But Harry's going to go on for a good number of years yet, and he's just said on the pitch he never would have imagined that he would have got to this tally, but he's got a good few years left in him yet. He looks after himself, he's a great professional, and he'll always score goals. It's the last thing that leaves these types of people. Obviously he's a different type of player maybe than he was a few years ago, and he'll change again in the next few years. Physically he'll change, just what happens with age, but he'll always be there, and he'll always be the one that you want the chance to drop to. And I said when he scored that goal that he's pure gold. It's actually the words that I've always used about Kane from when I worked with him with England. This is not a risk. This is not a risk, but this is a player that's absolutely certain and sure, and there aren't many of those around.
Also credit today for Christian Tellini, who took charge of Tottenham with Antonio Conte, I'm sure against his nature, but at least taking medical advice, not coming to the game. But he must have, Conte watching it, must have been thrilled. It was almost a perfect, apart from the sending off, a perfect Antonio Conte performance for Tottenham.
I was just going to say, he wasn't here, but it was probably the best Conte performance I've seen all season from Spurs. You know, going a goal up and then managing the game beautifully all the way through in terms of defensive control, but then counter-punching. They've had problems in the first half of games, Spurs. They haven't been up too many times. They were up at the Etihad a couple of weeks ago, but then got blown away by City in the second half. They've done really well today. You know, we'll come on to City in a bit, but it's no mean feat to keep City out. Obviously, they've kept them out here for quite a few times now.
It's amazing, isn't it? 5 times, and they haven't even scored.
Well, this is a bogey ground. I mean, yeah. You have them in your sort of club, you have them in your career. This is a bogey ground for City, there's no doubt. It's the curse of Spurs. We've got such a good record against them, and Spurs have been poor here over the last.
They've lost 4 of their previous 5. Yeah.
So look at that record. But a big day for Spurs. I said, you know, I think a couple of weeks they can get into that top 4. I said earlier on in the week that I didn't think Newcastle would get into the top 4. It was quite unpopular because I think Spurs could go on a run. Conte has that ability to get results and get where he wants to be. I was a bit worried about them a few weeks ago because I just felt as though there was that little bit of unhappiness. But then we did the Arsenal game. I thought they were poor. But then we did the Monday Night Football game. That was probably a big turning point for them, that game against Fulham away, where actually I thought after that game, and I said it, there's no reason looking at these fixtures in this next couple of months. They're in the Champions League. They've got a lot to play for, and this can be a really good season for Tottenham Hotspur. There's no need to have this doom and gloom and these clouds hanging over you. They just need to put a smile on the face. And I think today, along with that, obviously that victory against Fulham a couple of weeks ago, I think they've got the foundation here to go on and finish in the top four.
Since they lost at City, they've not conceded a goal, actually.
No.
That's a great step forward. But seasons are like that, but they're back on the up again after a great start to the season.
Yeah, it's the best I've seen Son today, Martin. I thought that he just looked like he'd lost a little bit of something. I think Graham Souness was talking before the game about obviously the injury he had to his face. Now that might have put him off, and obviously he's played a lot of football and he's been at a high level for so long. You can have a dip. But I thought today he looked like he got a bit of his spark back.
Well, those goals at Preston in the FA Cup
obviously
must have helped.
Yeah, big goals. Kulusevski, Son and Kane are a very, very good front three. Yeah. I think and Bentancur and Højbjerg in midfield were outstanding.
You gave Højbjerg the player of the game, and
he was
outstanding.
He was everywhere, wasn't he? It was and actually you don't often associate with Højbjerg the word quality on the ball. But what he did, we expect him to get in front of people like he did on that goal where he intercepts, but then that little bit of a poke pass towards Harry Kane to put it right in his path was brilliant. And he was the best player on the pitch. That's a brilliant day for Spurs, a really, really good day. And as I said before, they've got no excuse now in terms of sort of thinking that they're in a bad run. They're now starting to pick themselves up, and they can look forward to the rest of this season and think they can still achieve something.
But what sort of day was it for Manchester City? You did say at the end they're no worse off than they were on Friday morning, with Arsenal having lost as well. So, but we're very reluctant to point a finger at Pep Guardiola, understandably.
No, we
but there's something not City-like about them.
No, do you know something, Martin? 2-3 weeks ago I was asked who I thought would win the league, and I said Manchester City. And to be fair, I've said it a couple of times since you asked me on this podcast, and Arsenal fans have obviously been up in arms about that, thinking that I'm not paying them respect. However, I have to say that when yesterday when Arsenal lost, because of what's happened in this last week, I said this to you before the game, I'm less sure about City. I said this to you before the game. I'm less sure about City before this game than I was 2 weeks ago, and today they can go within 2 points of Arsenal. That seems really strange. But the Cancelo incident, the leaving out of De Bruyne, Diaz and Laporte still stuck on the bench, just things that I look at and think Gundogan not playing today, it just feels all a little bit odd. Some would call it tinkering. You know, he's a genius, Pep Guardiola, and this is a moment in time. But it isn't beyond criticism. We have to notify people when we think that we see something that's not strange. And this is a very odd period in the sense of what's going on. We said a few weeks ago when we did this reverse fixture, why is De Bruyne not playing? Why is Cancelo not playing? Why is so-and-so not playing? Why is Diaz and Laporte not back at centre-backs? I'm still thinking that now, but he made us look stupid a few weeks ago because obviously they came back and won 4-2.
But not to satisfy him, because after that game, even though they come back and won the game, he made that press conference and the interview with us about things not being right. And
they're not right. No. I, honestly, today, that was not... I mean, forget the fact that they've lost 1-0. There's been times when I've watched Pep Guardiola's teams lose, and I've thought that's still a Pep Guardiola performance. The amount of times that they got counter-attacked on today, the amount of times that they got broken through, the amount of space that they gave up in midfield and the joy that Bentancur and Højbjerg had, that doesn't happen. When Manchester City are absolutely at their best, they make sure they sustain attack. So they'll keep the ball up in the final third of the pitch, they'll play it around, they'll often give it away, but then when they give it away, they'll go and win it back 9 times out of 10 within a 20-30 minute sort of space, 20-30 yard space. Today, they were having to charge back to their own goal. And that's because they're just not right. You know, I spotted the sort of idea of that right channel where Rico Lewis was playing. I thought if he comes into midfield, Kulusevski and Kane will spring into that side with Emerson Royal, and they did do, and it was an out for Tottenham the whole day. What Manchester City ordinarily do is not give you an out. They don't give you an out. And then they got the out, but then the City back four weren't dealing with it either. So they were breaking through the midfield, which is unusual, but then they were breaking through the back line as well. Obviously, they're a good front three. So the two things that you ordinarily always think about with Pep Guardiola's teams defensively is winning the ball back early and sustaining attacks, and then maybe the back four might sweep it up if the midfield don't win it. Those two things didn't happen today, and that's a real worry because it undermines your performance if you're getting counter-attacked against. I always remember the most difficult games that we had at Old Trafford were where we couldn't sustain attacks and we were having to attack and then run back to our own goal. If you're having to run back to your own goal, you have to start all over again, and that's what was happening today.
Erling Haaland, discuss.
I have to say I played for a manager and I can hear him saying now, get your head up, Neville. You know, if there was a throw-in and I didn't see the strikers run, I can hear him saying it to scold. Not too often to scold, but I can hear him saying to other players, get your head up, get your head up. You're not seeing the runs. I can think of Ruud van Nistelrooy making those runs that constantly that Haaland's made today and us not seeing those runs. And he would absolutely batter us. It was the one thing you had to get the ball into your striker if that striker was making a run. Now, I said at some point in the first half, they didn't play that ball over the top once in the first half. What does that ball do if you play that ball over the top? I used to think in the game, you have to play the ball over the top of the left back. If I was my right back, I'd throw that ball over the top of the left back, or throw it over the left centre back, or kick it over the left centre back and left back's head at least a couple of times in the first 10 minutes.
Chip it down the channel.
What that makes them do, maybe you can do it with a bit more quality nowadays than maybe we did 10, 15 years ago, but what that makes the defenders do is think that you're going to play it in behind and then they drop off. Then you get your space to feet. It's really, really simple. It sounds sort of a little bit too basic for how these players play nowadays. I know they're tactically and technically incredible, so I'm not in any way, shape or form referring back to say you need to go back to play how we play, because Pep Guardiola's designed football in a way which, to be fair, is unbelievable. But I have to say today that back three for Tottenham, they don't feel like they've played against Erling Haaland. They've played against him, but they haven't played against him. They've not been threatened. He's made, I don't know how many runs, Martin. You've seen them, I've seen them, Jamie Carragher's seen them, the people at home have seen them. The fans in this stadium have probably seen them, where he's made that little run and he's gone in behind and he's made that run into that channel. And if you play that a couple of times in the first part of the game, it might then create that extra space in front for the other players like Alvarez or Bernardo Silva. It just allowed, because they never played it, the Tottenham back 5-3 to squeeze. And I have to say, I think he's been let down in that game today, Haaland. And I'm not quite...
He looked like he felt he'd been let down as well.
He's been let down. I don't want City to change. I'm not expecting Pep Guardiola all of a sudden to start playing sort of direct football or through passes and force the ball forward.
Or leave him out.
But I think he has been let down today. And if Pep Guardiola and his coaching staff are watching that game back, which they will be tonight or tomorrow morning, they must be saying to their players, surely your first port of call is looking where Erling is and looking what he's doing. Because if you can get him through in one, then you're going to... Now, that might mean that, they were forcing it probably a little bit earlier on in the season at times when they were trying to find him maybe too much. They've left Kevin De Bruyne out, which is another factor. But that lad today, as I say, I'll repeat it, has been let down by the fact that they've not played to his strength. They've not played a pass to him. He didn't have one single attempt on goal, I don't think, in the game, unless it happened in the last couple of minutes.
He scored in one of the last 7 away games, and that was 2 goals he got at Leeds, if you remember, a few weeks ago, yeah?
Yeah, so look, he scored a bag full of goals. It's difficult to criticise Pep Guardiola, Manchester City, those players, because I trust them. They've got credibility with what they've achieved. The manager is a genius and one of the greatest managers of all time, but we are allowed to point out that the leaving out of Diaz and Laporte, the... playing of obviously Rico Lewis at left back and then pulling him into midfield, allowing Kulusevski down there, not having Gundogan in the team, not having De Bruyne in the team, it does start to raise flags. The Cancelo, obviously, letting him go in a... Well, it was quick. It was all of a sudden, he's gone in a flash.
He snapped his fingers and you're gone, yeah.
You're gone, you're out.
Yeah.
So there's things happening that are making me more nervous. I don't want City to win the league. I prefer Arsenal to win the league out of City because I think the league needs it and I think Arsenal deserve it at this moment in time. But in terms of my prediction, I'm actually more concerned before this game when I saw City's team today, not just now after they've lost. When I saw that team, I thought, he's still tinkering. Because I just think straight away, I look at it and think, Ake left back, Diaz and Laporte, Walker right back, you've got your solid back four there. That will really be difficult to penetrate if you Kulusevski, Son and Kane. You put Gundogan and De Bruyne in front of Rodri. You've got your delivery in midfield. You've got Gundogan's sort of connectivity that he brings. You've got the brilliance of Rodri. He looked exposed in that game today. And then you might have Alvarez, Grealish, Mahrez, and obviously Haaland up front, whichever one of those ones you want to play wide. They have lost something with Sterling and Jesus. I mentioned it in commentary. They have lost something in the sense
and Zinchenko as well.
And Zinchenko. If you want that was the strange thing you said at half-time. And you're absolutely right. If you want a left-back to go and play in central midfield and be that sort of, if you like, play that dual position, he's probably one of the best that you could find. So it seems strange more and more that Zinchenko's been let go. But the two wide players, Sterling and Jesus, they did make those diagonal penetrative runs in between full-back and centre-back. Jack Grealish and Mahrez very much stay wide, so they have lost a little bit of goal threat from those wide positions. That's obviously been replaced by a centre-forward who can score more goals than the one they had last year. But things are changing a little bit, and they're still working it out. We said at the start of the season it might take time for Erling Haaland to integrate into this team, but because of all the goals he scored, we sort of thought, well, he has settled in straight away, but he hasn't. Forget the goals. He hasn't settled in straight away in the sense of how they're using him and how the team's playing, because it is scruffy at this moment in time. And a little bit of a worry, I would say. Not something that can't be overcome next week. We're doing the game next week, aren't we? Manchester City and Aston Villa. And then they play, I think, Arsenal on the Wednesday. So they've got a big 2 games coming up, and they could be within 2 points a week on Wednesday. But the reality of it is something isn't quite right, and I'm not sure of my prediction a couple of weeks ago because of Cancelo, because of the tinkering, because of what I see. And I have to say, I felt that before the game when I said it to you. It's worrying me if I was City, the way in which Pep Guardiola is in some ways just doesn't look like he's quite happy and settled with the squad.
Did Arsenal, in a way, lose better with their 1-0 defeat in their performance than we've seen City here?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think Arsenal played the way that they play. I think they could have scored goals. Goodison Park is a little bit of a bogey ground for them. Mikel Arteta hasn't won there, I don't think, in the time that he's been at Arsenal. Sean Dyche, new manager, new lease of life. Everton gave it their all. I thought Arsenal played well in the game. I thought Arsenal played as Arsenal play, but lost the game. Whereas today, I don't think City played as City played and lost the game. So I think that's why what you're saying is correct. City, I think, to be fair, psychologically, whilst they end up on the same points behind that they were at the start of this weekend, psychologically, I feel like they'll end the weekend in a worse place than Arsenal.
Sean Dyche? Old-fashioned values.
Absolutely.
No snoods at training.
Get your snoods off, get your hats off, get your pants off.
And your pads on.
I mean your long pants, sorry, I don't mean your pants. Yeah, no, get your shin pads
on for training,
because we tackle.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to tackle in training. We didn't wear shin pads, but we did tackle. I've never agreed with bobble hats and snuds. Never agreed with that. Long pants, I think players sometimes used to wear them. You know, I used to wear sometimes gloves, but I never wore long pants and never wore snuds or hats unless I was doing like a basic sort of warm down session. If I was training properly, which was obviously, 2 days before a game or whatever it would be, you'd make sure that you had the stuff on that you'd be playing in on a Saturday. You can't in training. I know people think it's old school, but you can't head a ball with a bobble hat on. You can't. It's impossible. If you've got a snud on over your face, it's just not how you play football. So I can see that all day long. That's something that I didn't particularly like. But there were players that I played with that did wear hats and did wear snuds. So, don't get me wrong, they weren't banned at Manchester United, particularly in the winter months. But I can see why he wants to get into them straight away and toughen them up and get them right.
Bleep test as well.
Yeah, get the old bleep test in. Yeah, look, it's a throwback. But I have to say that yesterday, it was simple. Work as hard as you can. Don't give in. Fight for the blue shirt. The Everton fans are no different than most fans, but they are, to be fair, demanding of hard work, passion, and they got that yesterday. Play the ball forward, make sure we're in the game. I thought Everton did really well in the sense that they looked to me like they caused Arsenal problems with crosses, with pressure, with set pieces. Obviously, the goal came from a set piece, but there were a couple of crosses that came into the box where they got bodies in there, midfield runners, where they should have actually scored more goals, Everton, through that. And it looked to me to be an Everton-type performance that I would expect at Goodison Park when they're playing against one of the top 3, top 4 clubs, obviously top club at this moment in time.
Can they stay up, do you think, with this new injection of manager bounce and Sean Dyche's principles? And it was effective, score from set pieces.
They certainly
One
can.
game, I know. But
no, they certainly can, because if they keep the players fit, obviously Calvert-Lewin played yesterday. Yeah. He went off after 60 minutes, but that's obviously right because he's not played that much football. But it's important to keep the players fit. But if you get a group of players fighting like crazy, working hard, fighting for the shirt, and they believe in the manager and the manager believes in them, you can achieve big things, particularly if the fans are with you as well. I do think Everton have got a great chance of staying up. I actually went to Brentford and Southampton yesterday, and I'd be a little bit worried if I was Southampton and Nathan Jones. Obviously, they're in a poor position anyway, but they lost 3-0 at Brentford. Brentford is such a good team when it comes to what they do. They just absolutely fantastic in terms of their shape, their defensive structure, the way in which they utilise.
You spend time with the owner. That's a difficult thing to do. That's a great feather in your cap.
Yeah, well,
he keeps himself away from the media normally.
Yeah.
I count you as the media.
Yeah, I had a good day. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy going to Brentford anyway, and sort of was invited a couple of weeks ago. So I had a really good day. Was impressed with everything, as I always am when I go there. And it was nice just to watch the game and watch Brentford without, obviously, from a commentator's eye or from a media eye, but from a Southampton. It's the first time I've seen Southampton live this season. We don't always get a chance to see every single team, and it's the first time I've seen Southampton live, and a little bit worried, a little bit green in terms of how they played the game. A few talented players, obviously, but when you're talking about Everton, I think that they have got a chance. They're in with a big fight, and Sean Dyche certainly won't let them off the hook. There'll be no complacency. They've got a long way to go, but I do think they come out of this weekend, I think, I won't say buoyant, but certainly I think encouraged by what's happened against Arsenal yesterday.
And they go to Anfield, Monday Night Football.
Well, we've got that, haven't we?
Yeah, and what can we say? I mean, we've talked a little bit in the podcast recently, and this barren spell for Liverpool's continuing. That was a fairly tepid performance at Wolves, wasn't it?
Really poor. I mean, I've also seen the highlights. I watched the sort of 5-10 minutes highlights that were on the television last night, and defensively, they were shambolic. Individually, collectively, easy to play against. Obviously, it's not going perfectly well for them up front either. Gakpo, Nunez, Salah just haven't quite sort of hit it off yet as a front three. That might take some time. But the rest of the team's in a bit of a mess, and they're conceding really, really poor goals. And it's, to be fair, the first time after a game where I've probably seen Jurgen Klopp almost in some ways apologise and just say, I'm sorry.
Mystified, really.
Yeah, nowhere near. Almost like, where do I start type sort of reaction after the game. And look, there are internationals still in that back four. In fact, all of them are. And nowhere near good enough. Absolutely nowhere near good enough. Individually and collectively, there's no excuse for that. Absolutely no excuse for that. There are other teams who've had injuries defensively who cope better. I don't know why they've gone to pieces the way in which they have. Only Jurgen Klopp will be, will people say that this happened in his 7th year at Dortmund. I dismiss all that sort of nonsense and stuff. I mean, they've obviously got the ownership sort of stuff sorted out. They might be looking at other clubs and thinking we need to spend more money, we need a rebuild and all that. But at the moment, I always think if you're getting the best out of the current players that you've got, and Liverpool have got a damn good squad. They've got some injuries, that's a factor. But the players that are out there should still be doing a lot better than they are. That was not good enough yesterday for Liverpool Football Club, and what they have achieved in this last few years, they're well below the standard, and they need to wake themselves up because, whilst I think sometimes with the way I see it is that you build up enough credit that you go easy on them for a period of time because you're entitled to a little bit of a dip. We had it at our time at United. That's why we've not gone and you don't go overboard with City today because of the fact of that. But it's getting to that point with Liverpool where you think to yourself that there's some really worrying signs and really worrying performances, and individual performances are sort of well below the level.
I'll finish with Manchester United because we have
Chelsea,
to talk about that when they're going to Chelsea next on the grounds of a big club not delivering. And unlike Liverpool, who probably will say, well, we haven't got the financial resources of a Chelsea, even a club like Liverpool, a few have. The cash has been splashed, and you were there on Friday night. What did you make of the newcomers and what Chelsea are trying to do?
Yeah, it was a 0-0, which we never like a 0-0. We like goals. The fans like goals. But I was actually intrigued and interested through the whole game by Fulham and how they defended, by this Chelsea group of players, 33 of them, that had dwindled into 11 each match. And Graham Potter mentioned before the game, thanks for reminding me, Gary, when I asked him, how are you going to manage these 33 players in this next few months? He's got obviously quite a few games. But with Chelsea, there's going to need to be time. That's the first thing to say. You need time to bed in new owners into the club, the new principals, the new manager. They've obviously changed manager earlier on the season, and you've got new players. So you've got new everything. So there's time needed before we go into anything else. You can't get away from this staggering spend. I said jaw-dropping was the word. Jaw-dropping is the word I used on Friday. I'm not sure about it. It doesn't feel right to me in the sense of is it the right approach? Ordinarily, you might spend 200 or 300 million, bed 4 or 5 in. Then you might bring in sort of, if you like, the summer after another 3 or 4 or 5 players, and then it's an 18-month process. They've done it all in one hit, and we might get to the same result in the same speed through doing that. So we have to wait and see now. I think they've spent the money, and we have to wait and see.
But eight-year contracts. I mean, I don't know what the longest one you ever signed, but it wouldn't have been an 8-year one, would it?
I did actually sign a 7-year deal, but the thing with me is when I signed a 7-year deal, I was from the city. I loved the club, I supported the club, and I was never going to leave. It was a handshake. It could have been done on a handshake and it would have been honoured by either side. And I think, to be fair, that's how I felt at the time. But you're right, I'm not buying these 8-year contracts. So the argument for the 8-year contracts is obviously that it beats FFP in terms of the amortisation of the fee, so I get that, and that's a reason to do it. But what they're saying is that it's a strategy. When Chelsea went crazy in the summer, I called it chaotic, the way in which they went about it. Actually now, when they do it twice, it's not chaotic, it's a strategy. It's actually what they do. So they mean to do it. So then I look at the 8-year contracts and I think, okay, FFP, if they're going to come clean about it, it's probably is the reason why they've done it. But one of the big reasons, I think, on the briefings that I feel they're talking about this idea that, yeah, but it locks young players in for 8 years and we've got certainty. That comes with great risk.
And also on a certain wage, which I don't think the young players will probably be too happy about by the time they get to middle career players.
Well, I'm going to come on to talk about the certainty of an 8-year contract, because there is no such thing as certainty in an 8-year contract. Yes, there's no doubt. Let's say Mudryk becomes a Messi in 4 years. And Chelsea could sit here today and say, yeah, but we've got him locked down for another 4 years on a lower wage. I don't care whether he's got 4 years left on his contract or not. It's not like a Harry Kane situation here where he's grown up at the club. Mudryk will kick off, his agent will kick off, he'll either down tools, he'll say, I want more money, and you'll end up having to pay him the Messi wage anyway, or he'll have a very unhappy player for the last 4 years who will, to be fair, feel as though he's been exploited because he signed an 8-year contract at the age of 2021 or whatever it was. So in football, in this country, with players particularly coming from international soil, I do not see how an 8-year contract can be honoured if the player progresses into becoming something that's far greater than what he is today. So for me, that's one thing I wanted to say. The second thing is that I wondered this whether, and it might, I don't think anyone's asked the question, maybe they have. I can't believe they've signed an 8-year contract without a break. Is there a 5-year, and I don't know if you can do this, is it a 6-year with a 2-year option? Is it an 8-year with a 5-year break like you do in commercial property when you take a lease and then you have a break? If you're not available for a certain amount of games, but you can still use the accounting sort of, if you like, benefit to get the sort of 8 years of the amortisation.
Which will be stopped, won't it? It's going to be 5, I think.
There's no doubt that's going to be stopped. I mean, obviously, they've done that, and okay, they've not broken any rule at all. Clever. Well done to them for that.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual 8 years, but if will every manager that comes in that 8-year period want the player? Will that player not want to go back home at some point? It just feels to me like I don't. In football as we see it in this country, not NFL, not in sort of America, I don't see the benefit of an 8-year deal. If you sign a 5-year deal and a player does brilliantly after 2 years, you've still got 3 years on them. I mean, even a 6-year, you've got sort of 3 and 3. The 8 doesn't. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't see where it brings any benefit to the actual club other than the FFP and the accounting mechanism and the accounting benefit. So for me, I'm struggling with it a little bit to think that the wheel can be reinvented and that they found something really clever here that everyone else is sort of not spotted. I don't understand it. I said on Friday, they could look like the smartest people in the room in 2 years, or they could look like pretty stupid. I don't know which it'll be, but I do think it'll be one or the other. I don't think we'll get an in-between. I think there'll be an element of, what did they do? What the hell was that? Or, wow, they've changed the model of recruitment in English football, and well done to them. So, I think we have to allow time, going back to that first point, to see how this plays out. They've signed some very talented young players. I like Badiashile. I think Mudryk showed great promise in his first game. He was ill on Friday, so I'm going to let him off and forget about that performance because he wasn't very good, but he was ill, so let's leave that. Don't know why he played. Fernandes got a lot of promise. His numbers are big in terms of the things that you'd want a midfield player to do, but the price is big. So there's a lot of, they've got Chilwell coming back, came on. You've got Reece James coming back. So there is promise. Thiago Silva was majestic, by the way, and I want to mention that. He's still the best player on the pitch. They've got a problem at centre-forward, and that needs dealing with, so there's going to be another load of money spent in the summer because they have to deal with that unless they're thinking of bringing Lukaku back. Look, interesting times at Chelsea, and we're just going to have to let it play out and see how it goes, but something doesn't feel right. And if something doesn't feel right, it's usually not. But I say that with a feeling that we must wait and see what happens in the next 18 months. You know, Graham Potter will or won't get the chance to be able to build and see it out. He strikes me as a manager that wants measured, calm, slow build approach rather than like sort of this massive amount of players thrown at him in one hit. But he's at Chelsea and he's going to have to obviously adapt and deal with it.
Casemiro, should he have been sent off?
I thought it was harsh, but I thought that Erik ten Hag summed it up perfectly when he said he took a risk. If you put your hands on someone's throat and you leave both of them, I think even if it's one, you just put it out to sort of protect yourself. But I think once you put two, I think you've got an issue. And he's basically taken a risk. He's a little bit like the boy Romero here, isn't he? You know, he's fantastic at winning the ball back, and he's always on the front foot. He takes chances. He
very rarely gets sent off.
No, he very rarely.
He's one of those players like I remember Gilberto at Arsenal back in.
He makes 1,000 fouls, and he always gets it. Fabinho's the same. Rodri's the same.
Fernandinho.
Fernandinho. They're brilliant at it. They're outstanding at sort of making sure a foul's not a yellow card, but giving them. But he's just been done a couple of times now, hasn't he? And yesterday, you know, even at the end of that sort of scuffle, he ends up, I think, having a little bit of a laugh and a play with Will Hughes, and it looks like it's sort of quite. But when you sort of, if you like, you freeze it, it doesn't look great when you freeze it because it looks like he's basically strangling him.
You'd be very surprised if he got off, even if Manchester United were a bit of
No, he'll not get off. In fact, to be fair, there'd be risk. I think it'd be too big a risk.
They'd risk another game. Yeah.
They'd risk another game, and they could increase it. So I don't think
that would be the final, would it?
They won't. They won't appeal it. They'll just. They've got 2 games against Leeds, and I don't know who the other one is now. Should know every fixture, really, but I don't. But they've got the next 2 games, obviously, against Leeds, haven't they? Got the game on Wednesday, the game next Sunday. So I think they'll think that they can probably get through the 3 games. He will be disappointed, Erik ten Hag, because it is stop-start, and he has become the most important player for Manchester United. He's held them together in midfield.
And Eriksen's out as well.
And Eriksen obviously out as well with that Carroll tackle. So. I think where I think that Manchester United will get to is that they will be without him for that 3 games. They've got a cup final coming up, but they've got a job to do in the league yet. So, I think that Erik ten Hag summed it up well. He thought that there should have been others punished in the same way. He wanted consistency, but he took a risk, Casemiro, and I think that he's just obviously got to be careful because referees, I think, one thing I would say is Howard Webb's interview with us on Friday was outstanding, and you can see what they're trying to do, the referees. And they don't want to interfere, but I think on something like that they will interfere because it did look bad when you freeze it. The fact of the matter is he lets go quite quickly. I don't think he's actually got him properly around the neck. I think it just looks like he has with his gloves on.
Will Hughes is one of the gentlemen of the game as well. So
he took it really well, didn't he? He just stood there and sort of accepted it.
One thing you've not said, and we'll finish with this, Manchester United have gained 3 points on Manchester City and Arsenal this weekend. What does that mean?
Let me have a look at the league table. Let me have a quick look at the league table, can we? Are we with a chance again, Martin?
Well, I'm asking you that.
Where are we up to?
And we is you, not me, by the way.
42. Look, I don't think Manchester United will get there. I think they'll fall short. I think the Eriksen injury, and I think that, just not quite there, are they? But they're doing really, really well. And they're competing, and they look happy again. That's a really big thing. Manchester United need to look happy on the pitch if you're a Manchester United fan. Sure, Everton fans are thinking the same, and many other clubs that have had miserable times. You look at Newcastle and now they are happy again. So I think that from that point of view, Manchester United are doing well. It's not ridiculous to suggest they could be. I don't think they'll win it. I've never thought they would win it. I've thought Manchester City will win it, but it is starting to. I'd be worried if I was Manchester City. I think the fans would start to get worried a little bit now of City because of the fact of how they are. United look a happy bunch. City just at this moment in time look a little bit moody. I thought Spurs did a couple of weeks ago, but they've come out of it. And I think that City need to come out of it as well. They need to have maybe a little bit of, one of those meetings that you have every so often where you bring everyone together. And it's like, hey lads, let's get in the dressing room and sort this out.
Spurs have had that. They had one of those, yeah.
They've had one, have they?
Yeah.
When was that?
After the Man City defeat, yeah.
No, I mean City.
Oh, sorry. No,
yeah, I think City. I think City.
They need one.
Yeah,
they need
City to me look like they need the manager, the coaching staff, the players all in the room saying, right, let's go for it. Yeah. Come on, let's speak our minds, because it looks to me like there's sort of like a grumble. Just not saying who to who, but it just looks like a grumble in there. Whereas with United at this moment in time, they do look together. They look solid. They look like they're sort of, if you like, their trajectory's going that way. City could easily still win the league, but United are in a good position. And ultimately, big game in a few weeks against Newcastle that we have in the Carabao Cup. A big game for Newcastle as well. It's a brilliant fixture with jeopardy written all over it in terms of what both clubs have been through. Newcastle haven't won a trophy for how long?
So 1969.
1969.
The Intercities Fairs Cup.
So what's that? Is that 53 years or 43 years? What is that?
54.
54 years. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And United haven't won one for 5 or 6 years, have they not? So, there's a lot on that game. But there's a lot to play for, and we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
One thing about City, players can have a grumble now because the transfer window's closed. You're not going to be packed off to Bayern Munich.
No, you say that. I mean, as you know, I love Cancelo because I worked with him at Valencia and saw a great talent that I thought would flourish, and I enjoy watching him play. But he's gone, and he's gone so quickly in a flash, and that can happen. Pep Guardiola. He has the similar characteristics to a manager that I played for, and great managers that they have control of the club, they see something, they've got their blinkers on and they go for it and they don't back off, and whoever's in the path will move out of the way, and that's the way they are. And you've seen that with Pep Guardiola. He's ruthless, clinical, that's why they're brilliant as well. It's a trait that is a strength of theirs, and he's seen something he doesn't like. Cancelo's gone, but he's also worryingly not seen something in Diaz and Laporte and De Bruyne today, which, there is something not right at this moment in time, but maybe it'll settle down for City in the next week or two. But I do feel like they need one of those sort of, if you like, those team group meetings where you go and it was done over alcohol maybe 20, 30 years ago. And we just go have a night out, but I don't think they quite do that now.
No, sparkling water. I think. Well, we'll talk about City in a week's time because we'll be there at the Etihad. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Martin.
Yes.